Okay. So this is, and I need to be able to see everybody at this table back here, so if you don't mind, just make sure that you can see my face so that I don't feel weird going like this. So this is kind of designed for college students / grad students that are leaving here to go and or are graduating and staying in Stillwater. And so Drew and I have some specific things we want to share with you about that, but this is also going to be helpful, I think, for those of you who are leaving high school. So we invited you seniors to come because, especially Drew's part, once he gets up here, he's going to walk through the same thing we walk through with incoming freshmen on how to pick a church. And so his part is specifically going to be geared for what you guys are getting ready to face, but I think you can also hear some of the things we're talking about, because we're talking about transitions in life. And transitions in life are just challenging and fun and exciting. You may not think so yet. Maybe you do. You'll look, yeah, some of you know, but you'll look back on it. You'll like wish that you could go back and do that again because it was exciting to not know. Now you're like, not knowing is terrible. But at some point, not knowing would be like sound like awesome. So here's why we want to talk to you. Three main reasons why Drew and I started having this lunch, and why this one we want to open this up to more and more people who are going into this phase, is because we've been observing probably 5 or 6 years. We've been observing seniors who are finishing and starting to think about different things than maybe you did when you were a freshman or sophomore in college. And so we've seen this like natural kind of disconnect that takes place when you start thinking about other things and going somewhere else, and careers and responsibilities and paying bills and loans and all that stuff. You just are at a different mindset than you were maybe a couple years before. And so we've seen students go through that process, and some of them start to feel weird about, like, I don't really connect with this anymore. Or I don't have a whole lot in common with this, and we're like, that's normal, that's great, that's fine. So we've seen that. The other thing is we've been talking to alumni, and that call us back, and we ask them, or we call them, ask them how they're doing, and a lot of them have struggled, honestly, with this next transition, and so we started talking about it. We did a survey recently, and 23 of our alumni filled out the survey. We asked them all kinds of questions about, how, if they were prepared in college to kind of move into this next phase of life, and what would have prepared them better. What kinds of things do they wish they would have known? Have they found a church? If so, what church? What, how's that been finding community? And we've gotten some real honest answers. And to be honest with you, majority of them that were really connected here have struggled there. And in fact, I asked like 6 or 7 of them, the ones that are doing really well, that are connected in a church, to come back and talk, and all of them were too busy with their churches to come back and talk. So we're like, okay, that's awesome. So I'm glad, it's like that was a win for us, and that's part of the reason why we picked them. But then they couldn't come help us out. So no, we get it. We actually have a video from one of last year's graduates, Kayla, and she's going to talk for a few minutes about like her experiences. And if those of you who know Kayla at all, have talked to her at all in the last year, probably some of the challenges she went through. There's a lot more than she'll say in this 3-minute video here in a second. And so we've talked to alumni. And then the other thing is Drew and Alec and Kelsey and Rachel in spirit have been, we traveled to 7 different churches in Oklahoma City and Tulsa in the last few weeks. And we visited, we talked to them about students that come out of college and how well they transition into plugging into the church, connecting and serving and all that. We met with churches that we would want to try to recommend to you. And so you'll see a list of some of those churches on this card in front of you, and Drew will touch on those a little bit later. But asking them questions, we learned so many things that were like, yes, that makes sense, and why haven't we talked about that? And so there's several things that I'm going to share with you. In fact, the majority of things I'm going to share with you are things that we learned in visiting these churches, in thinking about after you leave college and this next transition in life that are some really unique challenges that you're going to face because you're from Stillwater and college, but even more so being connected here at Sunnybrook or the Table. You'll have some unique challenges, I think, because of those things. So there's this card on your table, the 3 points that I'm going to make, okay? And you can grab that out. I want you to take notes, okay? So grab that sheet of paper, and then you're going to fill in the blank, and there's more on the back, more space on the back to write if you want to write down. Yes, it's that. It's this. If you want to write down all the profound things that I say, or if you have a journal, that's even better because you'll keep it. So, real simple. I like these pictures. Not that you're going to move to a big city. Okay, you may move to a smaller community. I don't know, than Stillwater, but I like this idea of these two people kind of overlooking the city and going, "Wow, that's my new home, huh? Like that's where I'm going to live now. It looks so big. It looks so busy and intimidating. And where am I going to find my place there? And who are going to be my friends there?" And I mean, just so when I saw those two pictures of those two people, that's kind of what I thought. And I think, man, that's going to be a lot of what you guys are going to be experiencing and thinking through. So the first one is simply plan to mourn college. This is one that we've never talked about and never really, we saw students doing it. Kayla's a great example of someone who last spring semester, almost every time we talked to her, she would start crying. And it became kind of a joke. Let's see if we make Kayla cry again. She didn't like it, but, we found, weird pleasure in doing that. So, but then the reality is, like, she's emotional for a reason. Some really significant things happened in her life here, and I would be willing to bet that for a lot of you, for most of you, some really significant things have happened in college for you. Connecting to a church is one of them, maybe, but the friendships you found. I think about back in when you were leaving high school. Some of you are in that stage now, leaving high school and coming to college. And if you loved high school so much, you were probably really anxious and not real crazy about going off to college. If you weren't crazy about high school, you were probably super excited about college to get away. And so I think that's just interesting, because oftentimes when you've loved your college experience, it just makes it that much harder to look forward to something else, because you're like, I don't want to leave this. You feel somewhat like, oh, gosh, I kind of have to. Like I have to go out now. And so that is normal. And I think part of the thing that we want to challenge you to do is plan to take some time over these coming weeks. And sometimes it'll come and you won't even see it coming and you might get emotional. Other times I think you can intentionally plan to just think about the relationships. Think about the key moments. Think about the significant things you've learned, the lessons you've learned, and just ask God to I don't know, help you mourn those things, to help you go, okay, that was then, and that was so good, and God used that and all that, and pray through that process. Just like someone mourning someone who's lost, it's a process. I think there really is a grieving thing that can happen when you mourn previous great things, because those great things aren't going to, the memories of those, the impact of those is going to go with you, but the people themselves, the churches themselves, the lessons themselves, those just carry with you in memory, and they aren't going to be there when you get there. So it's normal to get emotional. It's normal to come to an end of a really good season and to feel sad that it's ending. So that's normal. So something that's unique about the churches in Stillwater is maybe one of the reasons why you've connected to a ministry or to a church is because there are ministries and churches that are going out of their way to reach you. And that's something else you need to mourn. I'll talk more about that here in a second. But churches and people and ministries going out of their way to reach you, to meet your needs, to invite you in, that's something that you need to mourn, because that's something that doesn't happen in this next phase. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. So that's the first one, is to plan to take some time and mourn college. And so this is the tension that I felt in wanting to talk through this is not at all to say, oh, it's going to be terrible. Where are you going? It's going to be not at all. I just any transition in life, but I just feel like especially this one. I was just talking to a mom of several students that have been through our ministry. If you know Aaron Madden, his mom is staying at our house this weekend, and Abby Madden was super involved, and Josh Madden was super involved, and she was just talking about when they left college, her and her husband, when they transitioned into adult life. She said that was the hardest transition that they made, and it was interesting. She just brought that up out of nowhere, and I said, "Well, that's what we're talking about tomorrow at lunch," is because it really is a unique thing. So, to mourn the past in order to kind of really be open to what's next is super important. Next one is examine your expectations. This is a big one. This is probably the biggest one. Plan to examine your expectations, and I have three types of expectations I want you to think about. You can just write down job, church life, and time. Or job, church, and time if you want. Job, church, and time. So your expectations about your job. Okay, this is something that was somewhat eye-opening in a conversation we had with a church in Tulsa. You've been working hard to prepare for a job. All of you, as you're that's actually the one thing that like motivates you sometimes to finish the papers and to study for the test and to stay up late and do all that stuff, is like, this is all for a purpose. Like, I'm getting a job someday. This is all going to be worth it. And I don't know if that's why you do it, or I don't know what maybe just love to learn. But I've found that, when you get to the end of your college time, it's like, yeah, the love to learning thing is over. I'm ready to be done learning. I'm ready to get into what I just remember coming out of college. I didn't want to read another book. I just wanted to do something. I just wanted to practice what I was learning. And so you've been preparing to do a job. We had a former student at lunch in Tulsa last Monday say, they taught us how to do our job, like taught us the kinds of things we're going to be doing when we do our job. They never really taught us about the difficulty of finding a job. So think about your expectations about finding a job. And so what the guy at the church in Tulsa said was, a lot of them have expected to find fulfillment in the job they're doing coming out of college. And oftentimes, that's just not the case. You've been planning about it. You've picked several different degrees, and you landed on one. You think finally that's the one, and you're thinking that's the one I'm going to really get to use the gifts that I've been given to. And so, like, this finding fulfillment in the job you get out of college is like assumed. And what we're learning is, and this is actually just true, most oftentimes your first job out of college isn't going to be the one you keep for the rest of your life. It might just be one to help you gain some experience in order to get to a job that you really, really want. And so beginning to think through, like, what are my expectations for this job? Am I expecting to find fulfillment in this job? Because that may not happen. So, and here's a big nugget. If I say anything profound, it might be this. You will not find true fulfillment in what you do unless you have connected it to God's greater purpose for you. And here's what I think that can mean. You get out of school, you have a degree in something, marketing and whatever, and you're like, I can't find a job where I need, but I've got bills coming 6 months from now. I got to start paying my loans. So Wendy's is hiring. I'm going to work at Wendy's. But here's why I'm working at Wendy's. I'm working at Wendy's to start being responsible to pay down debt, because I want to pay this debt down. Because I know that's going to help set me up for a more stable financial life in the future. So I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to take the best job I can get to help start paying down the bills, but this job isn't where I find my identity. This job isn't who I am. This is just what I'm doing. And so now, instead of going to work angry and frustrated, and you think everyone else has the job that they went to school for, you're doing a job at Wendy's, but you know the greater purpose to it. Like God has helped, like you're going, okay, God, if this is what you have for me, this is what I have to do. I'm going to do it. And I use that job not to like downplay Wendy's. I don't know. It could be maybe a career there in management or whatever. But to say, like, if you've prayed about it, if you sought the Lord and He's like, hey, I provided something for her, why won't you take it? It may be pride or lots of reasons, but to say, no, God, I'm gonna do what you've called me to. And when whatever job you take, okay, whatever you end up doing right out of college, if you are able to connect that to your greater purpose, what God is doing in you and has for you, then you can find fulfillment in what He's doing. And all of a sudden, those employees at Wendy's become people that you're like, hey, well, I'm here. I might as well get to know these people and point them to Jesus. So, like that can be possible. Plan on feeling like let's say you get into a job. Plan on feeling like you're in over your head. Plan on feeling like you did maybe the first few days of class. You know, some of the freshmen. Maybe some of you might do this. Maybe don't. But can you guys picture freshmen in college? What that was like the first couple weeks, getting up early, getting dressed up for class, like being the only ones dressed up for class, right? The first 2 weeks of college, and you're looking around like everyone else just looks like they rolled out of bed. I look like I'm going to prom. What is going on here? And so that, but that may not be you actually, but that might be you. Like you come to work, you're super excited, and you don't know what you don't know, right? You're excited about what you don't know, and then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, this is a lot. There's a lot. I don't even know what's expected of me. I've worked at 3 different churches in the last 18 years. It took me 2 to 3 years of all those places to finally get to a place where I'm like, okay, I think I know what's expected of me now. 2 to 3 years. And that was, to me, it was a learning curve. I felt like I was, okay, am I really the right guy for this? I don't even know what I'm doing. Because almost every single job I had was, okay, you figure out what you're supposed to be doing. Now, you might get in a spot where they're like, this is exactly what you want me to do. But I'm just saying, be prepared to feel a little in over your head, and it's a normal process. It's a good thing. So, examine your expectations about your job. Examine expectations about church life. It will be different than here. Here's another statement. Don't allow what you had here to hinder what God has for you there, because that is certainly a reality. Don't allow what you had here to hinder what God has for you there. This book, Life Together, I have some copies back there. They didn't cost $5, but I'm selling them for $5 because I really, 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 really want you to buy this. Here's a couple lines from this. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German pastor. Long story. He tried to assassinate Hitler. He got caught. He got killed. But he was awesome. So you can read about his life later. It's phenomenal. But while he was at this underground seminary training pastors for this underground church in the German, when Hitler was doing his thing, he wrote about community, life together, life in community. And so one of the things he says that's really, really important is every human wish dream. When he talks about wish dreams, he talks about something that is, I'm going to go way over 15 minutes. Wish dream is something that is like, it's like your ideal picture. Like you have this picture of the way things are going to be, and that's what you hope and assume and expect it to be. He calls that a wish dream. So he says, every human wish dream that is injected into Christian community is a hindrance to genuine community and must be banished if genuine community is to survive. That's what else he says. Christian brotherhood, sisterhood, is not an ideal which we must realize. It is rather a reality created by God in Christ in which we must participate. So those two things, what he's saying is, if you just, I did this in college. I had to read this book again because I spoke about it last September at our fall retreat, and I was talking about community, so I reread this book. and I was convicted because I did this. I came out of college. I had a great small group with Jim and Andrea Johnson. When I was in college, he was a professor at this college. My wife and I and 2 other young couples, and they were our leaders, and we would hang out all the time, and we laughed together, cried together, went through all kinds of crazy stuff together, played cards till late. I mean, incredible community. So I just thought, that's my first experience with it. So I thought, well, this is the way it is everywhere. I get out, that was my norm, is awesome community. I get out there, and that's not the case. We had 3 other young couples, and they were driving 30 minutes to get to place, and they would stay an hour and a half, and then they'd be looking at their watch, and then they'd leave, and I wouldn't see them again for another week. And it was just impossible to get any traction into community with them. And then we started having kids, and kids just ruin everything, and they're awesome, but they ruined everything because you couldn't ever talk. They're just interrupting constantly, and we were all on the same stage, but it was just like, I'm longing for this, and I was holding what I had before and letting it hinder what God had in front of me. And it hindered my ability to really connect and to minister and to receive from this community. So it's going to be different. And I just challenge you to walk through that and to examine your expectations. Here's the other thing we haven't said very well is, if you've loved a ministry here in Stillwater, maybe it's a college ministry, or maybe it's a church, maybe it's Sunnybrook, that's really blessed you, is I want to challenge you to not think of it as to not be thankful for Sunnybrook, period, but to be thankful for the body of Christ and God's work in and through Sunnybrook or the table or whatever. Because if it ends there, then you go somewhere and you're like, well, we've heard this. We've talked to several, Drew, Rachel, and I, all of us have thought about people that have left here, and they've loved Sunnybrook, and they go and they look for Sunnybrook everywhere else, and they can't find it. Not that we're awesome, but they've just decided to let it end with Sunnybrook instead of going, no, that's God working through His body. It just happens to be our faces, okay? Don't miss our faces. Well, you can miss our faces. But don't go, well, there's no Rachel anywhere else, so I'm just going to be upset because there's only one Rachel. So I guess I have to live in Stillwater to be happy, you know? That's just not reality. And what, Ryan Vincent can say that. He's the only one. Maybe they're kids. So you gotta, the body of Christ is wherever. God's Spirit is at work wherever. And so I think now's probably a decent time to play Kayla's video. I think she talks about connecting to the church. And so I want you to hear it. We can only get one TV to work, so.
Hi, Table family. My name is Gail Hudgen. I graduated last May, so May 2015. Giving you a little context on me, so I know while you're listening to me, I was really involved at the table and at Sunnybrook. I led worship very consistently. I helped out a lot around the college ministry and in Kayla and all that kind of stuff. Was very involved in Sunnybrook. So I just want to give you guys a little, nugget on what I learned and what the Lord has taught me since graduation. So essentially, I just want to say, I know probably a lot of you go to this grad lunch, you feel like Sunnybrook is the end all be all. Like, you love it, like you would champion the name of Sunnybrook, like till the cows come home. Like, I totally get that because that's how I felt. Like, was on staff during the summer, like, love the staff, I think they're godly people. So I just want to tell y'all that I know you hear a lot of advice and you hear a lot of expectations. One thing that I've learned is the Spirit of God can work anywhere. So you're going to hear this, but if you're in a church that has, shallow teaching, if you're in like middle of nowhere and you go to church, shallow teaching, hey, Spirit of God can work. Like, let Him do a work in your heart. Someone speaking deep theological truth every week from the pulpit. Praise God. But like, Spirit of God can anywhere. Your expectations are really going to meet kind of the reality you see. So let God be your vision, don't be your own vision. And really what I want to point out to is people at church that you go to are not going to perceive you like as you think. College is crazy. It's a wonderful time where you step into a church and people say, how can I serve you? How can I meet your needs? And which is great. We love that ministry. But the real world isn't like that. The real world, you come in church and people say, who the heck are you? So show up randomly and ask to serve, and like that is going to be how you kind of get involved. So I really would encourage you guys, like, that is my second big piece. There's kind of two nothings there. The second piece would be, even if you're an introvert, like, I guess you, I totally understand, like, I don't feel comfortable, chill and be like, hey, like, I honestly, seriously just want to serve, like, how can I do that? And by doing that, there's going to be people at church that need you, like, they need you. They don't know they need you until you make yourself available. So serve, like, say, God, I want to serve you, I want to serve your kingdom, so give me avenues, give me eyes to see where I can fill in gaps in this church that I'm at. So those are two nuggets. I really wish I could go more, and I really could, but that's what the Lord's taught me. It's been a hard road, it's not easy, but God is good, He is faithful. So, love y'all.
Yeah, so if you know her, you know that it was a real struggle, right? Yeah? She did. She really, she had a lot going on, and some of you will too. So don't just love what God has done through a church, but love God and His church more because of a church. And you can find, everywhere you go in this world, you will find a body of Christ. So, so expectations about your time. Here's a reality. Most of your week, okay, let's say you leave here, you get a job. Most of your week will be spent working this new job with higher expectations and stress, maybe, to try to figure out your part and what's expected of you. And it's good, it's natural, and it's normal. It's good to feel that, like, oh my gosh, there's a lot on my shoulders, or oh my gosh, I don't know exactly what is expected of me. But and so your weeks will be that. So that's exhausting, by the way. Your evenings will either you'll just be trying to just decompress, or you'll be trying to find community. Your weekends will be busy. A lot of times, especially early on, you'll be traveling to see family. You'll feel like, oh, I finally have maybe some more money, and now I have some time. And everybody you know is going to be getting married, and so every other weekend you'll have a wedding, and you'll have travel expenses, and then on top of all that, okay, then you're going to have to try and find a church. So it's going to be really, really easy to not look for one and to just visit casually, sit in the back and leave early because you got to be somewhere, or you got to get home because you're tired, or you're whatever, or you're visiting your home church, which is not the church you're going to be connected to eventually. But so we have seen so many the first 6 to 9 months just mailing it in. And listen, if you've got a lot going on, you got a lot going on, and if you got to travel, you got to travel. If you have friends getting married and you want to be there, you're there. So some of that stuff can't be avoided, but just for you to be thinking about, like, okay, this is the amount of energy I will have, and it'll be expended on all these things, these new things that are happening. How much energy am I going to hold back for in order to find a place to connect? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so one of the questions that was asked, several of the questions that hopefully we touch on that you guys asked, but at the end, if we didn't touch on it, we want you to ask it again. Drew and I will talk through, Rachel, whoever. But one of the things you asked was about how do I view my previous relationships? How much time do I spend on previous friendships? And that's a difficult one. You got to figure that out. I don't know. But I just know that the more time you spend on previous relationships with people that are distant, the less time and energy you'll spend on establishing new relationships with people that you'll be able to see face to face, and that can ask you how you're doing, and you can really start to experience new community. So I don't know how you cut people off. I don't know who makes the short list. Okay, I don't know if your grandma makes a short list. I don't know if your best friend if your ex-roommates. I don't know who makes a short list. There probably should be a short list, a shorter list, and in order to make room for new people that God wants to use in your life, face to face. Not, hey, I'm keeping up with them on Facebook. I know what's going on. No, you know about them. They don't know you. You don't know them. So anyway, you have to walk through that. The last one is work hard to connect to a church community. Work hard. And so plan on it, expect it to be hard. Okay, just like Kayla said, I doubt that she actually had anybody say, "Who the heck are you?" when she walked into church. I doubt. But that's certainly how she felt. That is certainly how she's describing how she felt. Like she's expecting churches to roll out the red carpet like all of us have on you guys from almost the day you rolled into town, because we're dying for you to come to church anywhere. And then you go into these places and they already have their friend groups, and you're a visitor and they don't know if they're going to see you again. There's a lot of things that may hinder someone from like walking up and being, "Hey, you want to be a best friend forever?" That just doesn't happen. So they have their life, you're entering into it, and so plan on working hard to enter into it. And she gave some great advice. One of the best ways to do that is to say, "Hey, I want to serve. What do you guys need?" After you've figured out a place to connect, Drew's going to talk about how to find a church in college or after college. Once you figure that out, then be intentional by giving your time. Like I said, you may be tired from your job. You may be tempted to travel on the weekends. You may be disappointed that things aren't the way they were. And all of these things hinder you from putting effort, and it'll take it, putting effort into connecting to a new community. So here's the reality. The other part that's interesting is Stillwater does a great job of reaching college students. Most churches across the board probably don't do a great job of reaching college students. And so maybe your hometown didn't have a university in it, and like you go back and there's like hardly any. There's no college ministry. There's a high school ministry, and then there's adult Sunday schools, and there's whatever, and you're like, I don't feel it. So Stillwater is unique, okay? But I would say, personally, of all the ages and stages of life, the church as a whole, the young adult age is probably the worst that the church does, a worse job of reaching that age group. I don't know if I said that right, jumbled up. But anyway, the age you're entering into as a young adult is, especially if you're not married and you don't have any kids, is going to be the most, it's the area that churches just don't do a great job of reaching, because they don't really know what to do with you. They really don't. Starting a singles ministry is challenging. There's a lot of challenges with that. I've been on the church leadership side of it, going, as a married person, going, we need to have something for them. I don't know how to do this, because people come with all kinds of different weird expectations, and I don't know what to do with that. And yet at the same time, I'm like, if you're going to find someone, you want to find them in the church. I totally get it. You just can't say we're having a singles ministry so you all can find a spouse. That just doesn't work. It's just weird. So anyway, churches don't do a great job. Doesn't mean you can't find community. It doesn't mean you just might have to, instead of connecting with peers only, you might have to connect with multi-generational. In fact, several of the churches that we met with in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City, their small group connection, their life groups, whatever they call them, is multi-generational. So you'll get community. They just won't all be the kind of people that you're going to go to see a movie at 10 o'clock at night with. It might just be people that are different stages, and you get to be a part of a family in a different way. So here's something I want you to think about. So I have, not including salaries, but just simply money that I'm able to spend on college students. I have $13,500. That's my budget for college ministry. Drew's, not including salaries, including I assume paying the bills and ministry expenses, $20,000. That focus. So Fellowship of Christian University students, that's who Drew and Rachel work for, by the way. And so Sunnybrook, college ministry and Focus together make the table is kind of how we say it. So that's $33,000, $33,500, right? That's how much money we spend every year on you guys. That's just how much, the church, people's tithes, all that stuff, maybe some of you, if you tithe, that money a portion of that goes back to giving towards college students. Very rarely where you have a church that has a budget for a young adult to just spend and give and do things for you. So think about, you probably can't even add up. Since the time you've been in college, how much would you say, I don't even know, I'm just throwing it out. How much would you say, how much money has a church or a ministry spent just on you in the 4 years you've been here? If you were to guess, what would it be? I don't have any numbers in my head. I'm just wondering what you think. If our ministry is spending $33,000, I mean, have you ever gotten a free meal during finals week? Have you ever gotten any food handed out to you or anything? Anybody just handing stuff out? You know, that costs somebody something. So it's like you guys are spending all your money on college tuition and all that stuff. And then there's all these ministries and churches that are pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars to just give to you. And I say that just so you'd be thinking like, yeah, that's not normal. No, it's not. It's really not normal. And maybe if you've been in a church, you've had youth ministries that have done that, made trips cheaper for you. We've charged you $15 to $25 for a retreat that cost us $40 to $50 every time per person. So we're eating $30 per person every time you go on a retreat with us. That's just one thing. So all that to say, it just causes you, because people aren't just pouring out, it causes you to go, why isn't it? It's just so much harder to connect, and it will require effort, and it will require things from you and sacrifice. And by the way, I'll say this just as a side note, and actually a really important side note. Focus raises their money with churches and individuals. So churches and alumni are what give to the table to pay their salaries and to pay, their bills and their ministry expenses. So if you've been blessed by the ministry of the table, I want you to pray about and think about, this is another thing to plan on, like, I was there for 4 years. Maybe for 4 years I commit to giving a portion back, a percentage back of my salary to the table or to the college ministry or to whatever whatever helped you grow in college. So I want you to pray about that as well. But so here's the last thing. Those are my 3 things. Here's my last statement. It's on the bottom of your sheet in really small print. Building your life around Jesus and his mission, which is really our hope for you. And Drew will talk a little bit more about why that's important in the church. But building your life around Jesus and his mission will require you to invest. You've been given a lot. I know you spent money on college. I know you've come out with loans. But a lot has been invested in you. And so it's really, really, really time to start thinking about investing. Your time is an investment. Your resources are an investment. Your gifts and abilities are an investment. Things that you have to give. And I thought this was awesome. I wrote that Thursday, that statement. And then in service today, Jim read from 2 Corinthians 9. And I just want to read, I'm going to end with this, and then I'll send you into your group here in a second. But 2 Corinthians 9, 10 through 12 says this. Well, actually, let me say this. I forgot to add a part. When I thought about investment, I immediately thought of, I was reading this book recently about this farmer who farmed during the Great Depression. And he would sow his seed, and every time he would sow his seed, the winds of, I guess it was called like the black cloud of death or something, like the Oklahoma winds, it was so bad during the Depression, it would pick up dirt and debris, and it would come and it would wipe out crops. So he didn't know if he planted, if it was going to just be wiped out or if he'd actually get something. So for years, this would happen. And he was just, farmers were just investing, not seeing anything in return. And so there's a point in which they go, do we keep doing this? Because it could stop. If it stops, I have to plant it now because I don't know what's going to happen. But if I don't plant now, I definitely don't get any crop. But if I plant now, I could lose it all. And so I thought about that, like planting seeds. At the beginning, it's all upfront effort and cost, and very little reward and result. But there's a harvest of righteousness. This was what Paul says in 2 Corinthians. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increasing the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. I love that. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but also is overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. So it really is. I mean, for you to be thinking about, it's an investment. It's an investment. So just a couple minutes, because I went way too long. A couple minutes at your table. Think through which of the expectations do you think is going to be the most challenging for you? Your job, church, or your time? Which of those hit you the most? Where'd he go?
All right, guys, take about 30 seconds to wrap up, and then we'll start. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to try and work our way through this, have us done about 15 minutes, if possible. Anybody in here, like those of you college students, like regretting the decision to graduate now? I should have failed a few more classes or something like that, just stuck around a little bit. Hey, we want you to know that, you know, we're sharing some of this stuff with you, not to depress you or not to make you feel super bummed and, man, worst decision of my life and all of those things. But because we just want you to have proper expectations, and we know that a lot of people, because of misunderstood expectations or misplaced expectations, have fallen into some traps here. And we don't believe that, like, your life is going to be miserable from here on out. I remember when, shortly after first getting to college, I remember coming back and talking to a lady in our church asking me, you know, how are you liking college? And I told her it's great, and she said, man, I loved it too. Those were the best years of my life. And I remember thinking, that is so depressing. Like, I've only got, like, that means I've got like three good ones left, and then my life is just going to be bad after that. But that's not true. It has not been true for me. College was a number of things. It was one of the funnest periods. It was one of the periods where I learned the most. It was one of the periods where I built relationships the fastest, but I don't think I can look back and say it was the best. That I've had better years since then. I like my life now more than I liked it then. And as hard as this next transition may be, and for some of you it may not be as hard, we just want to make sure that we, you know, describe what it could be. It may not be as hard, but whatever it is, we really believe there's joy on the other side, even in some of the hard. And actually, we believe there's joy in the next month for you, even when it's hard. And we want you to be able to look forward to adulthood, even if it is with proper expectations. So I want to talk to you for these next 15 minutes about what it looks like for you to find a church. Here's what we believe, that this is the most important thing we could give to you, is a good, healthy church to be a part of. At the table, those of you who go there know that we have our 5 things that we try to stress to students: a gospel-centered life, commitment to community, contributor mentality, that is, I don't just come to consume but to give back, connection to older believers, and life in Christ. And we could spend this whole time just talking about those things. It would take a while, but here's what we believe. If we can get you connected to a good, Christ-centered church, then those other 5 things begin to take care of themselves. Because a good, healthy church will help you in those other 5 things. Will encourage you and will strengthen you in those things. And that's why this is so critical and so important for us. And we honestly, just theologically, believe Christianity is meant to be lived within the church. Christianity is the church in some sense. That you don't do Christianity by yourself, but you do that as a part of the church. That's how the New Testament talks. And so we want you to get there. But here's the thing. A number of you have never chosen a church before. Never picked a church before. It's kind of chosen you, or your family chose for you, or you came to college and you're like, I need to look at some churches, and your friends just said, hey, we're going to Sunnybrook on Sunday, so you're just like, oh, okay, and you just went there, but you never actually went through the process of determining what kind of church am I going to be a part of, and how am I going to get to be a part of it? And a lot of people at this age and stage haven't, and so that's a difficult thing. We want to try to make this a little easier for you. Just so you know, everything I'm about to share with you, almost everything, the main points are going to be on this little card that we're going to give you at the end. So you can carry this with you, and you don't have to, you can take notes, but a lot of it will be right here. So here's, I want to give you 3 questions to ask when choosing a church. When you're looking for, these are the 3 questions. Number 1, are they faithfully preaching the gospel? There are a lot of churches who believe in the gospel. You go on their website, and they'll have the right statements about it, who believe in the gospel, who will talk about it, who will give a little gospel presentation, maybe at the end of a service for invitation time or something like that. But that's different than churches that spend much of their teaching time focusing on the gospel. focusing on who Jesus is and what he's about. So that's a question asked. Do they faithfully preach the gospel? Are they spending more time on central things like Jesus and his identity, like the character of God, like what Jesus has done for us and made us as a church, or on peripheral things like how to manage your finances, like how to raise your kids, like building campaign stuff? All of those things are great things, and all of those things are okay to do for certain periods of time, like Sunnybrook is kind of doing right now with their stuff. But if it is a church that is constantly doing these things, okay, so we're doing a building campaign thing. We just wrapped up a year and a half or more of the Gospel of Matthew a short time ago. And from the Gospel of Matthew, we're not trying to learn what's the moral of the story. We're trying to learn more and more about who is this Jesus and how is he king over the world and king in my life. Those are central things, not peripheral things. How often, this is a good question when you're there, how often do I hear them talking about Jesus, his identity and his actions, who he is and what he's done? I had a friend who went to college with me, and after college, he went off to a pretty kind of famous up-and-coming church in Michigan with a ministry that was really becoming pretty big around that time in the early 2000s. And he said he was there really enjoying it, and he kind of looked up one day and realized, I think it's been about 2 months since I've heard the name Jesus in a church service here, in one of the sermons. And you may go, well, how would you not notice that? Of course you would notice that. And not always, no, because a church can spend a whole lot of time talking about how we ought to love one another, which is a biblical idea, talking about how we ought to be kind, talking about how we ought to serve, talking about a lot of really good things, and not talking first and foremost about what Jesus has done for us, which then leads to our response in how we live these things. And so it's easy to go, yeah, we talk about God, we talk about being good, but are we talking about Jesus a lot? Another question, and this isn't a deal breaker, but do their sermons spend more time on topics or on texts? They spend more time talking about, like I said, the 3 keys to marriage success, 3 ways to have godly finances or whatever. Again, those are okay sermons every now and then. Those are okay series. But do they spend more time there, or do they spend more time in the Bible? I know a number of good churches that preach more topically than expository or textually like Sunnybrook, and that's okay, not a deal breaker. But it is one question to kind of consider as you're thinking through how faithfully they're preaching the gospel. Here's the second question to ask. Is this church missional? Are they missional? What I mean by that is, are people in the church primarily there to sit in pews? Is it a large crowd that gathers every Sunday to hear a sermon and sing some songs and go out? Or are the people in the church serving? Are they using their gifts to serve within the church, serving in the different areas of the church? And is the church as a whole serving outside of itself, sending people on missions trips, trying to care for people in the community, doing those kinds of things? So is it a missional, like, active body, rather than one in which, like, the staff does all the ministry and other people just kind of sit all the time? So that's just a good question to ask. The third question to ask is this: do they fit me? Do they fit me? Now, this is a question actually everybody asks. You automatically ask this when you first go to a church. It's just that usually we use the wrong criteria when we ask that. When we say, do they fit me, we usually mean, do I like the music? Is the preacher funny? Do I like his messages? Those aren't bad things to ask. It's okay. I'm not telling you got to go find the place that only plays with an organ and sings old hymns and where the preaching is super boring. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying those aren't the primary questions we ask. This question is less about preaching and music, and it's more about passions and gifting. Here's the thing. Not every church can focus on everything. There are some churches that are really good at doing like overseas missions work. There's some churches that are really good at doing strong doctrinal teaching, biblical teaching. There's some churches that are really good at working with the poor. There are some churches, and hopefully churches are doing all of those things. Hopefully all of our churches care about those things, are trying to do those. But there's certain churches that are stronger in given areas of ministry and given passions. So the question is this a church where my passions and the giftings that God has given me is one that could be put to use here? Could I use it? Could I be a part of this? Either because they've got a ministry, there's 2 ways, because they've got a ministry that fits my heart and my gifting, or because they lack a ministry here that I could go and fill a need in? Could I play a role in this church? So asking that question, how could I serve here? Let me just say, and this is kind of connected to this, when you're looking for a church and you're asking these 3 questions, you're not always going to be able to check 10 out of 10 on all of those things. And I will just tell you, a C- church is better than no church at all. And there are students who leave and they go, no, I can't find a church that does this well or does this perfectly or does this perfectly, and I just kind of give up. No, a C- church is better than no church at all. We have a girl graduated from our church, from our ministry a couple years ago, Cecily Jameson, who went back to her hometown in small town Kansas. And it's just slim pickings when it comes to churches there. There's not a lot of really great, vibrant, amazing churches. And Cecily could have said, there's nothing here. There's no church that meets all 3 of these super well. I mean, I'm just going to travel out of town, or I'm just going to not go. I'll just watch Sunnybrook's sermons on video the day after, and that'll be my church. And she instead chose to find a church that was good, not great, decent, and that lacked in a number of areas, and just said, I'm plugging all in here. And so she plugged in, and she eventually even got asked to start a young adults Bible study. And so now she helps lead a young Bible study and life group for young adults in her age and stage of life, because she said a C- church is better than no church, and I'm going to get involved where I'm at. So that's good to kind of keep in mind. Here is now your process for getting connected to a church. 3 steps to take in connecting to a church. Number 1, spend a month or 2 searching if necessary, all right? A lot of us hate the idea of that term, church shopping. It feels very consumeristic, right, which is something we encourage against. But it's okay. It's impossible to know a church until you go to it. And so it is okay to spend 4 to 6 weeks trying out different churches and checking them out. So also I would say we would be happy to help you in that. Scott already referenced these cards here that have a lot of our alumni end up in Oklahoma City area or Tulsa area. So we've been checking those areas out, and there's some churches on here. These are not the only good churches in Oklahoma City or the only good churches in Tulsa. These are just churches where we know someone and can vouch for them, all right? So, but we would be happy to help you. If you're not moving to one of those, or if you're moving to one and looking for other options, we would be happy to help you try to find some healthy churches. We have connections with different ministers working in different churches, kind of all over the place. So if we can help in any way, we will do that. And let me just say this, as you're doing that search, recognize that it might be hard to gauge a church in just one service. To just go there and determine it may take you a little bit. I would also say check out the website. You want to know, are they faithfully preaching the gospel? When someone asks me about a church, one of my favorite things to do is go to that church's website and go to their teaching archive and just look at the things that they've been teaching through. Look at the kind of things that they've been talking about. So I'll do those kinds of things to check. All right? Second is this. After you've spent a month or 2, after you've spent that time, then you pick one and you plug in. All right? And here's kind of our rule of thumb that we try to encourage. Faithful on Sunday morning, that's a given, that you will try. I know you're traveling for weddings, you're traveling for whatever else, like Scott said, but that when you were there in town, that you were faithful on Sunday morning, plus one thing. Faithful on Sunday morning, that's a given, plus one thing. That plus one thing might be a Sunday school class. That plus one thing might be a life group. That plus one thing might be serving in the nursery. But to really start to plug yourself in means more than just the service. We assume that you're going to do that, but we want something else. It would be very worth your time. This might be your plus one thing to see if they have any sort of membership class that you could go check out that membership class, learn what it looks like to be a member there, learn more about what they believe and what they teach and how they operate as a thing. So pick one, plug in. Every Sunday morning, plus one thing. Here's the third thing. Start serving before Christmas. And that's actually, when I say that, I'm kind of assuming that you're traveling during the summer and then you really get going in August or September. So if you're jumping into a town here this summer in like a month, then I'd say start serving by August. Start serving by September there, by the fall. This will be important to give yourself some sort of deadline that says, once I've chosen a church, okay, I've chosen this church in a month, maybe 2 months, I'm finding an area to get involved and to serve. Know that this also might be your best place to build relationships. We talk about how difficult it can be to build relationships. You might find some of your best church relationships when you're serving alongside of people, when you're connecting, when you're both working in the youth group together and leading a small group together. That might be where some of those friendships come. And let me kind of add this on. I just had this thought as Scott was talking about how much we try to give towards college students and the budget that we have for you at this time, and the fact that they have probably zero budget for this next stage of life, whatever church you're going to. That's kind of a bummer that there's just not all kinds of stuff for you. But I'll just say these are Jesus' words. We know them from Paul in the book of Acts. He quotes Jesus. These words never pop up in the Gospels. The only reason we know it is because Paul said it, and he said that Jesus said this. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And so to move into this new stage of life where not everyone's going to be rolling out the red carpet, as we say, where not everyone's going to be giving a $30,000 budget towards meeting you and your needs, but instead to be in this phase of life where you're now giving money to reach the youth in the college or to give back to the table, or where you're now giving your time to serve, Jesus says that's more blessed than being on the receiving end of all that time and money. And so I just want to encourage you with that. Scott said it, be careful of not letting nostalgia keep you from loving your new church. So find a church, plug in, Sunday mornings plus one thing, serve, and work your way towards loving the people in that church where you're at. I'll cut it at that. We're done, and then I don't know if there are any questions you guys have that we didn't get to on this or anything else. So, questions.